All right, welcome back to the Shift podcast. We talk about AI for businesses. We take in all the news from the past X amount of time, typically 2 week period, and we talk about how it applies to you, the owner of a small to medium businesses and businesses at large, and for the everyday user. Alex is with me here. My name is Cameron. Alex, what are you seeing? What is the lay of the land in the past couple weeks since we last spoke?
Definitely, we've had a lot of developments. I think it's really interesting that they're more specific to integrations or specific use cases that are being built out a lot more now as well. Of course, we've literally just had Google's I/O 2026 as well, which I know we're going to touch on later for Omni and a few other parts. But I think it's really interesting to see how these larger hyperscalers are kind of moving through, but also I would say more fatigue as well for some people thinking that there's just more AI for the sake of AI versus really knowing the outcomes they're trying to get, which of course is where we can help.
Yeah, you cut out there for a sec. Hopefully that I don't know, hopefully that's on your side. It comes through on your side, but we'll see. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is always moving at a million miles per hour in the AI space. That has not changed in the past few weeks. And of course, we're going to kick things off with the biggest AI brand in our world, maybe not the world at large, but in our space, which is Claude. And Anthropic has just launched 15 ready to run workflows that plug into the likes of QuickBooks, PayPal, HubSpot, Canva, DocuSign, Google Workspace, to name a few. I have already seen this being implemented at some businesses I do some consulting for. What are your thoughts around this implementation? Do you think it's useful or do you think it's just not great?
No, it definitely is good. I think, like we said, it's the enabling of an automation or AI getting involved in a task versus a specific job. It is targeting the areas the business actually need help with, which is the great thing. It's actually solving a business problem. It's not just being switched on as more of a gimmick, which we tend to see with some of the other businesses we've worked with. So I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I think, again, as it comes down to are people actually knowing what they're using it for, how they're getting the outcomes for it, but having these integrations into the large tools to pull data out, discuss about, what's my latest run rate or my cash flow or stuff like this for QuickBooks or Zero or any of these platforms is always going to be incredibly useful, not just to a business owner, but anyone within the business for CFO lenses, financial lenses, or for example, sales teams into HubSpot, all these different things as well.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about this is that it feels so native. It's so easy to just plug and play. And that's what a lot of these small businesses are missing because they don't have an AI native person in their business a lot of the time. And that's where people like us in our business can come in and assist with things like that. But for the layman, for the person who doesn't have a lot of experience in AI, this is honestly an incredible first step, I think, for a lot of newbies out there. And as I said, I've seen it being implemented immediately into some businesses I do some consulting for, and it's been so easy. And honestly, it's been so incredible. So honestly, props to Claude. I don't want this to be the praising Claude podcast, but it is, in terms of what we preach as, practicality, it is along that line of just complete practicality for the everyday user, which you love to see. Uh,
Yeah. I was gonna
something.
just
Oh yeah, go for it.
No, I was just gonna build on that as well. I think the other two things that I noticed from it as well, which was really interesting, was one, again, it's another step in that direction of people being able to use it as layman's. It's not the JSON prompting, it's not all of these, complex things. It's trying to make it as easy as possible now. But also, Claude are actually listening to the market. Anthropic's actually listening to the market. We want this. We don't want this. We want this to work. We don't want that to work. I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen it with the private equity groups that I work with. They wanted a specific skill set up, like a private equity brain, and that was implemented. So it's fantastic to see the companies actually listening to the market, actually listening to the people that use their products, and then making changes and then making it as part of their product suite as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, and this is kind of AI at large, but it definitely comes into play when we're talking about these very specific plugins, specifically around, invoicing, finances. How comfortable would you be recommending one of these, more data sensitive plugins directly into a business?
I think because we're talking enterprise to enterprise development, I would be much more comfortable with that versus like a generic GitHub or some random MCP connector that has been set up in the market. Um, when we look at it for the data that's being accessed, again, what they normally do is role-based permissions. So whatever your role is within QuickBooks, you do or do not have access to that information within platforms like Claude as well. So from that side, the security is really, really good too. What I would say though is, again, don't just plug it in to have an extra thing plugged in. Again, if you're plugging it in, understand what you're going to be using for. Do you need to be looking at it? Is it more for your accountant? All of these different things. I think the true question though that we come back to, and we discussed it a couple of these times on the podcast, is are we going to be paying per seat in QuickBooks, for example, or these other platforms like we are at the moment? Or actually, because more platforms are going towards the headerless mode, as they called it, or using these MCP connectors to get into it, or plugins, actually, what does that agent usage framework actually look like for business in the future? I think that would be something to see in the next couple of months.
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see how it all plays out. So, did you have a look at all 15, or have you just kind of heard the ones that I was rattling off before?
I've gone through majority of them looking at the documentation, not necessarily seeing them implemented. But I think it's good to see, again, another 15 in the books, another 15 to, well, there's hundreds to go, right? So time will
Yeah.
tell.
So I'm curious, out of the 15 that you saw, what one would you be more willing to implement tomorrow? Because again, like for me, seeing HubSpot in action because I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of CRMs. All CRMs have their problems. But when you can see it interfacing with Claude in such a dynamic way, honestly, I was incredibly impressed. So if someone is using HubSpot out there, I would say this is a massive upgrade to your everyday use, just obtaining various business information, being able to compare metrics, compare yourself to the market. That's just some of the things I've used it for in the past 7 days.
I mean, from my point of view, it's a very consulting answer, but it depends. Because again, what's that business problem we're actually going to be using it for? What's the thing we're actually looking to achieve? Plugging in QuickBooks, great for an accounting part, but awful for sales. HubSpot, like you said, great for sales, but awful for accounting. So what I would look at is, if I was the business owner, business leaders, like we've mentioned in everything that we talk about, that business problem, I'd also be looking at which team is spending the most time on what tasks throughout their working week, right? What is that 80/20 Pareto principle that we go back to for if the sales team are the ones struggling trying to get through all of their different information, all their different logs, all their different AI note takers to understand how to make their sales, then start with those integrations first, start with that platform first. Don't
Yeah.
just go for QuickBooks because you've got someone maybe in accounting who is really excited about that platform, and that goes for any of the other ones, whether that be a plugin, MCP connector, normal connector, API, all of these different things. Always go back to what is the most repetitive task in the business for every single different department. Can we get AI or automation involved to take it away from them? And that's what I come back to.
Yeah, that's definitely the responsible and correct answer when it comes to business consulting. So I applaud you for that, Alex. But the next thing I saw is OpenAI is deploying DeployCo, which is a $4 billion consulting arm of OpenAI, which is pretty massive in my opinion. And I think this will shake up the consulting world quite a bit. What's your first take on this?
I totally agree. I think we've seen not just DeployCo, but other ones come to the market as well. I think it wouldn't decimate the consulting industry in the way that people think, because again, the AI is like a fantastic assistant at the moment. So what I'd be looking to do is, if you've got a load of people in, say, digital transformation like you and I do, that will support what we're trying to achieve. I wouldn't say that it replaces an entire team. Maybe it's a lower cost for that end client because you're doing it. If you're looking at time and materials, which is quite a lot of consultant gigs, that's how they do it, then maybe it can be done in 4 weeks versus 12 weeks. So then that's the way that you tend to look at it. The other side is, of course, AI does hallucinate. AI does not know everything. AI is still not perfect. So what I'd be looking to do is couple that with the really good team that actually know what they're looking at, actually have years of experience doing it. They've got that foundational knowledge to work together to deliver it. So I think it's definitely going to shake it up, but just AI on its own, at least at the moment, can't go through and solve all of these business problems and try and get the outcomes. Because again, when I'm delivering stuff and we've done it for clients and I was doing it at Deloitte, you normally take a quantitative data analysis approach for some of it, but also a qualitative workshop, sticky notes,
Mm.
conversations, interviews, all these different things. And again, my personal view, I don't think I'm going to convince a CEO to sit down and have a chat to an AI for an hour and it to go back and forth in the same way that a human would, at
Yeah.
least at the moment. Who knows in the future?
Who knows in the future? That's a very good point. Do you think OpenAI's consulting arm will be able to undercut companies like Deloitte? Because I do see them being able to obtain, extract, and at least have the data to make the decisions with in a pretty spectacular way. Because I can only assume if they're doing this that they're building out various tools within their consulting arm, within their OpenAI team, to give them some type of edge when they come into a situation over the likes of companies like Deloitte and other big consulting firms. What do you think about that?
Yes, but again, I would say that if I was, Sam Altman or Darren Marty or any of these people leading these companies that were looking for a consulting arm, I would be going to the big four, Deloitte, PwC, McKinsey, Accenture, Bain and Co, all of these different ones, and just taking as much talent as I could for specific domain workshops because it will help train the models versus what the documents say and the training say, but also help them implement it in the right way. So yes, I think it can undercut to a certain extent, but again, the clients still want the outcome, and that's what they're really paying for. So if the AI can do that with the team in tow, then I don't see any reason why, the likes of large enterprise companies or even some medium ones as well start to look at, let's get OpenAI in to do the consulting with the AI in tow versus let's get Deloitte in or any of the big four and say these guys are AI, process experts, transformation experts, op model, whatever it may be, and they're using some AI in the background. So I think that's the difference of are they doing it almost AI first with supporting resources, humans, or is it
Mm.
consultants, transformation discussions first with AI in the background? So I think it'd be interesting to see which one plays out. It's interesting to know just a last thing on that as well is of course Deloitte, got recognized that they had to refund, I think it was 400K for an Australian client where they were found to be using AI. So I think it would be interesting to see, what does that mean for the market for are people not only happy for the data to be ingested into these AI tools with I would want 100% security, none of it's being trained on, none of it's being stored, none of it's going to be used for those large models because it's very sensitive data, but can still give me the outputs for that one-off use case.
Yeah, absolutely. And that story about the person having to get their money refunded is insane. Because imagine dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on consulting and knowing that it's AI. That's the thing probably is knowing that it's AI. And what was it? There was a bunch of irrelevant links and stuff throughout it, I believe.
Yeah, there was a load of inconsistencies. The
Yeah.
report didn't make sense in a few places, and yeah, it's like we've seen in the legal industry as well. It's just not that critical thinking of double checking the outputs, double checking everything that goes through. And to be honest, I know you've seen it as well. It's just the bloat in some of the documents. Just because it can write 400 pages doesn't mean it
Yeah.
should.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So another massive groundbreaking announcement that we saw in the past week and a half is the Google event where they dropped Google Omni. Now, I have one headline here in my notes. Is it worth the hype? Question. So I know my take on it, but I would love to get your take first.
Is it worth just running through Google Omni first, kind of if people haven't heard of it, just kind of an
Of
overview of what it
course.
is?
Of course. So Google Omni is positioning themselves as essentially a full end-to-end AI video editor. That's what I'm seeing as the positioning for it, where you can do any form of content into any other form of content. And I'm using the word content pretty loosely. I'm talking text, image, video, etc. Right? Uh, and they're trying to compete with the likes of Dance for how cinematic they are. They're also competing against genuine video apps like CapCut and other editing software that have heavy AI integration. Is that enough context, do you think, Alex?
No, definitely, it's a great summary. I think
Okay.
it's, I would say it's slightly overhyped for definitely what it is at the moment, but it's the right direction for what these apps need to be doing. Again, like we are saying, for being user friendly, but also that capability of an entire storyboard and sort of editing that together versus just having the one-off image or one-off, video like we've had to date so far. I think the question is, though, how much of that needs to be in one tool, which is very expensive when you look at just pure image or video generation, versus I know there's open source tools like Remotion and Hyperframes, all these different ones that you and I both used, which are totally free to run on the computer that will do the editing for you. So I think that's where it's going to be interesting to see how much of it do we need to be in the tool, like Omni, which again can give incredibly good outputs if you know how to use it, but you're paying the premium to have it. The only thing I would add on to that as well is, to me, the entire AI video image generation space is Google's to lose. You have YouTube, you've got Google Images, you've got all these other things. You are a beast in that industry. There is no reason for you to lose that race in the long term, in my opinion. I mean, the only publicly accessible sort of acknowledged platform with, images and videos would be probably, X and XAI. They could use that and they should be top of the market, which we haven't really seen at the moment. Or Meta, Instagram, Facebook, all these different platforms, and that's got a massive catching up that it needs to do. So to me, it's Google's to lose at the moment. So I just get in there and dominate and try and make sure that they've got that market share like ChatGPT has done for more of that conversational interface.
Yeah, absolutely. My opinion on Google Omni, is it as good at as Dance or even Sora 2 for really realistic or cinematic content? No. And I don't even think it's really close right now. I think it's a similar positioning to when Nano Banana came out, the original, versus where Nano Banana is today. I think this is Nano Banana 1. And when the Omni 2 V2 comes out, we're gonna see it compete truly on a quality level. So that's the answer. If you're wanting cinematic content, really realistic looking content, I think Sea Dance is still the way. But you're absolutely right when it comes to the actual framework of what it is, what features it's offering. It's exactly what I want. It's extremely stripped back, and there's not enough there to call it like a full blown editing replacement system, but it is trending in the correct direction. And what you were saying about Google Omni being very expensive, right now, I can't see it fitting into any editing pipeline as the main editing service. What I see it being used as kind of like a CGI replacement or like a moment in the video where you're outsourcing basically. So you have like 5-10 seconds where you want to do X, Y, and Z. You would then, clip that 10 seconds, put it into Google Omni, do what you want with it, and then get it back and put it in your video editor. Because, if you're doing, a minute of editing a minute long video in Omni, it's not discriminating. It is going to charge you for that entire minute of exporting, regardless of how much work it's doing. So you're much better off still working outside of it and only using it when you truly need it. Anyways, that's Google Omni. I know you said you watched or you've seen all the things they were talking about in the Google presentation. I haven't seen any of it really. I only saw Omni. So I would love for you to fill me in and tell me about the general sentiment around Google's recent announcements.
Definitely. I mean, if we start at the high level figures, the highlight video alone got 60 million views. I thought the thing that was really interesting though is it only had about 8,000, 9,000 likes at the time of recording. And I think it's curious to see why that disparity in ratio for sort of likes to views exists. I know it's like a Google account versus like a personal account. So I would say that's one thing. Or is it just Google doesn't drive the excitement anymore for the tools they've got? But we'll put all of that to one side. If we look at the entire Google I/O event, one thing I noticed straight away is, for example, they were talking about the number of users, up to 900 million users, which, to be honest, I'd expect because they've got Google Workspace, it's integrated into all your emails. I would just tag on and make that figure that everyone's using Gemini as well, that there's no reason it wouldn't be. It is still, they're getting through a lot of tokens. I think they were saying something like 3.2 trillion tokens is kind of what they're getting through versus a couple of hundred, 700 million just a couple of years ago as well. So it's definitely scaling up on that side. One thing I know that we've touched on in the past was everything about looking at AEO, GEO, and SEO, sort of that entire brand space that you would have on the internet. They're
Yeah.
now saying that they've got, I think it was 2.5 billion monthly active users for AI search that they've got now. So it's interesting to see, like we talked about in the past, people are no longer going down and clicking on websites as much. It is just seeing that auto response that comes up the top, taking that and going through. I mean, page one has become so important now. I bet page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's almost becoming an archive now because I don't think people want to go down that route when they've got AI search, just chat to Gemini. They've got, 10 links or whatever it is on that first page. So if you are going to do that, you really need to optimize for that front page as well. The other product announcement, sorry, go.
I was going to ask you a question actually regarding that. And that question is, when was the last time you looked on the second page of a Google search?
The only time I look at those is normally because I'm doing research and looking for specific research papers or market papers or stuff like that. If I'm Googling, I know we were chatting about cameras the other day. If I'm looking where to buy a Sony or where to buy a Canon, I'm not looking at hundreds of different ones. You've probably got Amazon, Canon directly. You've probably got, I don't know, Curry's PC World in the UK. You've probably got about 5 or 10 links and you're done. So yeah, I think page two is the onwards is kind of dying a death, isn't it, to some extent?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, it's a very rare occasion that I'm looking at the second page of a Google search, let alone a third. And honestly, I feel like it's been trending in that direction for quite a while. I don't think that's new, but it's kind of put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, in terms of extended Google searching for me personally. But please continue. What else did you see in the Google event?
No, I think just the last couple of things really. I mean, one they were doing around Google Stitch, their new platform that they're bringing out as well. So again, they're starting to build up more and more of that ecosystem. I know they've got a ton of different Google experiments and labs that we're able to use as well. So I think it's just seeing that trickle through more and more into production. One thing I really did notice though, and I think this may have been, again, that sentiment turning slightly fatigued around AI, but also it didn't show anything amazing. Like they were talking about the agent platform and they got it to do a checklist about school year onboarding or something like their kids on first year at school, what they needed to do as a checklist. I
Yeah.
don't need an agent or AI to do that. That's not a defining feature of why I would go to Gemini or why I would go to
Yeah.
the other ones. Yeah, it's cool. It's got the Google Drive integration, but so does all of the other platforms with Claude and OpenAI to do that for you anyway with a connector. So I think it was a step forwards for some of it, but I wouldn't say it was a major step forwards for getting me really excited for what that next Google generation of 2026 is, unlike, VO3 and all these other amazing announcements that they made in past to, get some awareness. The other things as well is Gemini 3.5 Flash was announced. They were showing tokens per second as the main defining feature on one of their demos. I think people do want to get their responses back quickly, but I want to get the best response back in the best way possible, not just have, I think it was 1400 tokens a second coming back. So I'd kind of look at that. People also reported that the token usage gets filled up pretty quickly. I know they normally buffer it on the first couple of days whilst everyone, mass adopts it, but I think they've got some work to do on there. And they said the Gemini 3.5 Pro is coming out next month as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see, you know, Anthropic with Opus 4.67, they've been amazing, as well as we're looking at ChatGPT 5.5. That's been performing incredibly well. So I want to see Google leapfrog them, not match them for that 3.5 or 4 or whatever they call it.
Yeah, and we haven't really seen that from Google yet, have we? It's pretty much been OpenAI and Anthropic just leapfrogging each other, especially in the building world. I know there's been moments where Grok kind of creeped up for like a day in a
Yeah.
particular area, but for the most part, it's been a duopoly. But I think you said earlier that this creative space, in the creative AI space, is Google's to lose. They have so much infrastructure already in place. There's such, when you ask some random person on the street, what's the biggest brand in the world? They're probably going to have two answers, and it's probably going to be Apple or Google,
Yeah.
So those are the things that I'm looking out for throughout 2026 and 2027. Uh, so there's been a bit of a pricing war going on. Speaking of the duopoly between OpenAI and Anthropic, OpenAI offered enterprise Codex users 2 months free plus one-click migration, and Anthropic responded with 50% Claude Code quota boost through July. They're both racing for lock-in before IPOs. Apparently, that's the headline at least. So what are your thoughts around this healthy competition? I love to see the end user win because at the end of the day, the end user is winning here. So what are your thoughts around this competition? And if secondary question to tackle into that, if you were installing one of the two into a medium-sized business, they said, we don't care what one, which one would you go for as of today?
Definitely. So I'll do the second question first, then get back to the first one. So if I was going to go for one platform, I think you really can't go wrong with Claude, desktop, Teams, that entire thing is fantastic. The co-work, the actual main chat interface, if you've got the dev team that want to go down, of course, the Claude code route is absolutely fantastic. If you're building out a massive thing within the company, yes, it can get incredibly expensive for that API usage, but you can supplement that with maybe DeepSeek v4, or you can use, maybe a little bit of ChatGPT 5.5 here or there, the Codex lens. But if you want like a one and done, I am fully committed to looking at Claude at the moment. Not to say that others don't have their benefits, but Claude is it just works kind of the best at the moment for that. If I go back to the first question around the pricing war, I think it's interesting to see how this is all shaken up over the last couple of the months, because I know we talked on it, I think it was our first ever podcast, that, for example, ChatGPT was at around 24 billion ARR. Anthropic leapfrogged them to 30 billion ARR, and they did that. They almost doubled it in the first couple of months of this year, right? So that is all because of the enterprise levels that they're going after. I think the other thing when I look at this pricing war as well is the pricing for consumers, i.e. B2C transactions versus B2B transactions. I think OpenAI have really realized they need to go after that more enterprise and get back stuck in, like Anthropic have taken away from them, to have the economies of scale. Because like we said, it's much easier to explain to a business they need to spend £1,000 with you or $1,000 versus trying to convince 10 people to spend $1,000 with you. It's a much harder discussion for why they would do that on average. I also look at the quota, the usage, everything like that. The other thing that came out recently as well was, of course, SpaceX did that deal with Anthropic to have that increased access to Colossus, their entire supercomputer sort of infrastructure, to be able to get the outputs. So I think we're starting to see, because they've unlocked that next tier of almost ability, they can now put a lot more through and absorb, a lot more from consumers, whether that B2B or B2C, to actually get the outputs 24/7, 365, versus literally be capped because of their infrastructure, not the capability of the tools. So that will be time to tell. But yes, I think all of this comes back down to, is rumored, again, allegedly, we always say that in here because we're not lawyers, but at the end of this year, or next year, the IPOs are coming at some point. And the best way to do that is have the best ARR, the best team that sits around it, the best market presence, because that day one share price, everyone is going to be in there ready to go. And as we know, it can always fluctuate after that, but you want the best foot through the door at the start.
Oh yeah, I mean they're going to be the biggest IPOs in human history, I believe. I don't know why I said human history. There's definitely been no other IPOs. Uh, but yeah, it's pretty incredible what they're going to enter the market at. I can only imagine. But with these pricing wars and talking about the various models and how much they cost and the tokens spent, naturally, just generic users, general users, not enterprise, we don't have access to the highest models, but we do have access to very good models. And they do get very expensive, especially if you're on API. If you're on the absolute max plan, I haven't had too many troubles with it, and I consider myself a power user. Do you think that as the models get better, do you think the token economy will trend alongside it? Or do you think it'll get to a point where it's just not worth it to be utilizing the best models of the respective brands here?
I think again it comes back to that use case, because if we're looking at the average Joe or Jane, as they say on the street, right? They're not going to be using a million tokens, a million quota that you can kind of do at the moment. I would say that yes, that would definitely be for the power users, the tech teams, internal business functions that are trying to replace a HubSpot or some sort of CRM with their own version, definitely. But I think the average person is still using it almost like as an autocomplete to some effect, maybe with a few skills or projects plugged in here or there, but it's still coming back to, I want this task done. Can you help me achieve it? So of
Yeah.
course, if we're looking at the number of tokens involved with that process, having a larger context window is really useful for some industries more than others, legal, private equity, all these different ones with large documents. But I don't think for the average salesperson, that means they need to have this huge token economy, all these efficiencies in the background for how the model works and operates. It's just, does it sound really good? Does it give me the correct output? And can I actually do what I need with it? Because again, they're 25-ish dollars a month, aren't they, for enterprise, and unless you go up to the max plans. So they don't really see that cost anyway. The business owners will, that are listening to this podcast, but not a lot of the users within the business seeing it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of, the kind of financial aspect of these massive AI companies, Google invested $40 billion into Anthropic. Now, I think that's really interesting because if Google owns a massive chunk of Anthropic, can we still call Claude independent?
I think it's an interesting one to pose, isn't it, for how independent they really are and what the agreements are behind the scenes for knowledge sharing between the two as well. I mean, Microsoft is already there, they've already invested. Same with AWS as well, so the Amazon side. So I think I think a lot of the hyperscalers are almost trying to get their fingers in the pie, kind of to use the analogy there, just to be a part of the journey that they're going through. If I
Yeah.
was Google, I mean, 40 billion is nothing to me. That's probably what they make in an afternoon. So putting that into a company is no, qualm or queries at all, right? So
Yeah.
I think for them, it makes perfect sense. What I'd be looking at for them though is, if again, business owner, business leader hat on, what else could I be doing with that 40 billion? Do I really think it would give me an edge on investing into, you know, Gemini 4? Or actually, do I need to have this discussions, whatever it may be, with other companies, knowledge sharing, investments, so that I can hedge my bets for that longer term? That again, if they IPO, we're going to get a much more significant return on that versus getting an extra, you know, million users just to use Gemini instead of the other platforms as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, yeah, you're correct. I mean, the amount of hands in the pies of these companies is really interesting. And I think that does raise a concern just about data, right? Like that, we've given the most data at any point. Like, in terms of how much data I have given about my personal existence to these companies through these AI services is insane. Like when I look back a few years ago, I got a form asking me to fill out X, Y, and Z. I wouldn't put I wouldn't put 10% of what I put into AI on these forms. But here we are in 2026, giving diary entries. A lot of people use AI for, giving their thoughts and their secrets and their bank account passwords and who they like and who they dislike and very intimate thoughts. So I think we're going to have a look at the data sharing and data privacy laws over the next few years. I think will change immensely with the amount of data we are pumping into the ecosystem right now. And I can only imagine what that'll do for marketing and how that will play into, just regular businesses and how they actually use this immense amount of data that will be surfacing around in the next 5 years to their advantage. It will be very interesting.
I think the other side to add on to that as well is I know it's quite a bold statement, but I think Anthropic need Google more than Google need Anthropic, right? Because Anthropic's tool, i.e. the LLM, is incredibly fantastic, but they do not own the infrastructure. Google has GCP. They could literally switch it off tomorrow if they didn't like Anthropic, and say no more, sir, madam. Same with any of the other tools that are trying to use their services. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, like you were saying, the data privacy is one lens for them investing into and using their models or training or working with the team or whatever that kind of looks like commercially, that side. But the other side is, well, if they've got the infrastructure, Anthropic need that phone call. They need to be able to ring up, all of the team at Google and say, we need an extra 10, 20% for this next thing coming through. Or like we saw with Mythos the other day, a lot of people speculate they couldn't release it, A, because of the security risks, but also the infrastructure isn't there to be able to handle the demands that would come through for it because it's so expensive. So I think that's where we're going to see almost like a symbiotic relationship between some of these companies, at least for now, versus maybe the longer term of, Anthropic having their own infrastructure, data centers in space, whatever you want to say, underwater, like you said last time. It is just more that how can they actually sustain that long-term vision without the infrastructure, but still having the best market leading tool, on the market as it stands at the moment.
Yeah, I mean that really is the bottleneck, isn't it? It's the hardware going into the next few years because there's only so many data centers to buy up, where we're already seeing massive plots of landing bought up. I don't know if you saw Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, as he weirdly likes to be called.
Okay.
Try to obtain that massive plot of land in Utah, which is like, I think I saw this graphic where it said you could fit every single F1 track in that space 3.5 times or something like the whole plot in which they do the F1 tracks.
Yeah.
So that's how massive these plots of lands are. And I also saw another metric where it said, and don't quote me on this, but it said something around 1 million people. That's the equivalent amount of power that this data center will be utilizing, the equivalent of 1 million people in homes. So I'm curious, just a little bit of a tangent, like what do you think these data infrastructures are going to do to everyday environments that we have in the world? Because I know they're going to want to put some in Australia because we have so much space. And obviously in America, in the middle of the country, there's a lot of space.
I think there's lots of different misconceptions around sort of the data centers, kind of how they work, how they operate. Yes, they're not entirely the most environmental friendly operation that exists at the moment, but it's the first iteration of them. They're going to get better over time. We're going to find new ways of doing things. Again, like Elon was saying for the ones in space, is it something in there which, because it can dissipate the heat and everything else, they become much more efficient to run in the long term? I think if I come back to, and this is a global statement, not necessarily for America or the UK or Europe or Australia specifically, is I think there needs to be an increased allowance for, again, that nuclear option as well, nuclear energy option as well, because the Gen 4 reactors and Gen 5 that are coming through are, again, I don't want to have the words of the Titanic, right? But they're impossible to kind of blow up and kind of have the issues of Chernobyl and all these other ones that have happened in the past. So then the infrastructure would be available to power all of these without the increased burden on the everyday person trying to use it as the end person. I don't want to see the entire rainforest destroyed to build a data center either. So I think we are going to need some protected land like we already have already, or we need to look at, again, does that data center, I know it's, again, hypothetical thinking because this is an ideal world, but can they go up or can they go down versus going spread out, right? How is the best way that we can structure them that way versus just taking up 4,000 hectares to be able to put one data center in versus 100, but it's vertical or horizontal to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree about the nuclear power thing. I mean, Australia is the perfect candidate for nuclear power. We have so much land. We're on our own tectonic plate. We very rarely have any earthquakes. We have no volcanoes. Yes, we do get, very hot. But, all those things that you typically look out for when you're thinking where not to put a nuclear power plant, Australia ticks a lot of those boxes. So I would love to see Australia go into that, but we're kind of not a fan of that here,
Uh,
unfortunately.
The other thing that will be really interesting as well is we were talking about the traditional nuclear option of more fission. So again, using that uranium as the fuel to get the output, but increasingly we're seeing that fusion come through as well. So where we're using plasma instead, which is, it's incredibly hard to do to get the plasma to come out of it. And it's, there's only been a very, very few handful of instances where it's come out as net positive in energy, i.e. more energy has come out than they've had to put in to get the outputs. But that is the ultimate end game for a lot of people, thinking that that could just generate almost infinite energy in the future for running in the background. And it's not a physically nuclear option. It's incredibly hot and there's many other things that go with it, but it's not using a nuclear fuel to be able to get that output for running all these. Again, if it was free energy that you had at the home, why wouldn't you use that as well? So I think there's benefits to letting this infrastructure be put in place, not just for the AI data center argument as well.
Yeah, but it will be very interesting how it plays into the AI economy and ecosystem, especially over the next decade when we do see the need for this hardware more aggressively. Uh, it's been about a month now since ChatGPT released 5.5, their flagship model. What are your thoughts on it a month later? Was it as impressive as they claimed it to be, or are you missing the hype?
But it's a difficult one to say because I think it's an incredibly good model, as you would expect. I still find it really robotic. I'm harping back to the days of ChatGPT 4, hoping that they're going to bring back some of that personality, but I think it may have been lost in the process. It's having the fewer hallucinations. It's doing better overall. Would I say that I would definitely go to that over the likes of Claude? No, but I say that it's definitely one that I would use day to day. It depends on that cost or the outcome that we're trying to achieve. Again, for example, the Codex model is incredibly good at coding and it's good at that lower level details where sometimes Claude can get confused because it's very good at almost that top down approach. Codex is really good at the bottom up approach. So I think if you're already using it, it's a great model. You've probably noticed no difference to the last couple of, 4.4 or point 0.3. It's probably giving you a few better answers here or there. But for business owners and business leaders, I think it's one to watch out for if you're looking for that tool to come through and be used.
Yeah, I get asked all the time, and I'm sure you do too. It's like the most, classic question, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever it is. And the reality is, for any, everyday business out there, There's no real going wrong. Like, you can't mess it up that bad. Obviously there is models that do things 5% better than another model. But we're not in 2024 anymore where, it kind of mattered a bit more, I feel. I think we're at a point in time where these models across all these different companies are so competent in what they do that for everyday regular tasks, you're not really going to notice a massive, massive difference. It will be marginal. And you're absolutely right. The difference between 5.5, 5.3, everyday users are not really noticing these changes. And it's not affecting, the bottom line of these businesses. So, whatever one you decide to pick, just go with your heart. But if you want to do a little bit of research, there's websites out there like LLM leaderboards where you can see the exact test against the niche of use you're going to be utilizing. So if you're a creative writer, you can see which one is excelling in that particular field. I don't know if you've used those LLM leaderboards before, but I do use them when consulting clients. I like to get nitty gritty with it.
Yeah, definitely. I love artificial analysis.ai. They've got some fantastic stuff in there that I've looked at. I think if you want a super quick top tip to look at the different ones, I would go on to openrouter.com and go to their platform. It's got an option which enables you to add like, $5 of credits just because that's how they work. But then you can go to the model chat interface and you can load in all these different models and have the same conversation with them and see the different responses. So if you're not sure which one that you like personally, maybe you're doing some creative writing, marketing copy, whatever it may be, or cold emails, I would go into something like OpenRouter, load up the chat interface, add OpenAI's, ChatGPT-5, Claude, Opus 4.6 if you wanted, Sonnet, Gemini, whatever you wanted is your like options. Literally put in the questions, the task, the documents, whatever you're trying to chat back and forth with. Of course, going back to data security, as we always mention, don't be putting confidential data in there because they've got very different agreements to the likes of going natively with Anthropic and Claude and OpenAI and ChatGPT, all these different things. But essentially, it gives you a feel of what are the personalities of the different models if you really want to see.
Yeah, great tip. And a couple weeks ago, we were talking about layoffs in the business space, how aggressive it's been in the tech space specifically in 2026. Now, there's some reports out there talking about how companies cut people, deployed AI, realized that AI couldn't do the full job, and ROI expectations are being missed. Now, is this something that you felt is obvious and you're like, of course this is happening? Or are you kind of surprised by this?
The experience of their AI, sorry, or the.
The fact that they're not meeting ROI expectations.
I mean, yes and no to some extent because a company of that size would have change management people in the business to try and get those outcomes. But I think, I was chatting to one very, very established firm the other day, and they were going to start with finance and HR for their AI transformation. And I'd argue that's probably one of the harder places to start because
Mm,
A, the HR information is very sensitive, and B, what's AI really going to do for you for a size of their scale that they're already using like SAP and some of these big purchase to pay sort of accounts payable process platforms? Well, optimizing something there would probably give you more of an output. So I think it
yeah.
comes back to what was that objective they were really trying to solve. And again, maybe there's some reports, and if anyone from Meta wants to tell us the ins and outs, then it'd be great to hear. I think what it does come back to is though I think some companies are slightly future planning as well. So they're looking at what is that next generation of roles. I think, as we've seen with some of the AI tools, they've shown that yes, you can increase capacity. Some companies are using it as an excuse to make some roles redundant, which
Yeah.
maybe were overhired within COVID, like we saw with the hiring frenzy for a lot of different companies. But also, there's that differentiation of some companies are just looking for some of the reduction in management, let's say, because they want outcomes, not just the management of those outcomes as well. But Yeah, it's very, very mixed reports on what the jobs actually relate to when you get down to some of the details as well. But if anyone has lost their job, then deepest apologies and best of luck with it.
Yeah, of course. But obviously, we're going to bring this back to the SMB talk and how it applies to the average person. And we've beat this drum a million times, but at the end of the day, it is what task are you trying to solve here? What are you trying to expedite? What are you trying to optimize? And that will tell you whether that position can be replaced or if it's just a tool to enhance their position and for that person to get more meaningful work done at an increased speed. That's my take, at least. Um, so we have been speaking about some amendments, some laws coming into place regarding AI in Europe specifically. We spoke about that. Uh, and now there has been some amendments. There's been some pushback on this. They've pushed it back to August 2027. But there is some rules around bans on some nefarious AI technology, specifically around R-rated content and transparency rules. What are your thoughts around this? Do you think the world just needs more time to think about this, or do you think that everything's moving at such a pace that they'll end up pushing things back and maybe just fit a new fit some more laws in that they're sure about, like this, X-rated content laws?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that we've mentioned in the past as well, and this is, globally, not just specific to the EU AI Act, is how much of this is an AI law and how much of this is a law that exists which AI should be tagged onto, because there are already a load of laws around there for, the R-rated content, that entire not only industry that exists, but also platforms and everything else, right? So the question I always have is I don't want to see over-regulation, which then stifles the innovations, or as we've seen with the likes of, Sora, for example, was just not physically allowed to be turned on in the UK when it got released because of our digital act that they put through. So I think what we'll just see is, let's face the reality. You and I don't have the leading models in the UK where I'm based or in Australia where you are. They are American. So
Yeah.
they, could just turn around and say, well, we're just not going to serve your industry, your country, your region, whatever it may be, because it's too difficult to get there. I think what we do need though is, like we saw for the deep fakes, the all of this stuff that's kind of come through from AI for voice cloning and the scams and everything like that. We do need protection in place. I think one that is a very, very fine edged sword is AI in image generation that is not nefarious in the true sense of the word, but for example, marketing content. Should the user know that it is an AI photo, even if it's a real product that has been put into a specific scenario, even if it's got an AI background, which could be done with a simple tool as like Canva, just changing backgrounds, but because it's been generated by a Nano Banana or ChatGPT, that means it needs to be flagged as AI. So I think it doesn't surprise me it was pushed back. Businesses didn't really know it even existed in some areas, or how to comply to it, or what it meant for their business. But I think what will just don't want it to stifle innovation is kind of the short and long of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of really tricky things to navigate in that space because once things go into law, it's very difficult to change them. And we've seen in Australia specifically, we're very aggressive with some of the laws that we put out, and some companies just flat out refuse to be here. They just remove
Yeah.
themselves from Australia because some of our laws, which is pretty interesting. So 82% of small businesses are now using AI.
Mhm.
That is a very interesting stat. Um, Using AI, though, that's the word there. They're using AI, but what are they actually doing with it? What do you think? If 82% of SMBs are or small businesses are using AI, what percentage of those people are using it effectively and efficiently?
Oh, I would really say it comes down to the company, but I don't think it's going to be a very large number, if I'm honest, for getting the most out of the AI tools, apart from using it here or there for emails or getting some wording for some documents or stuff like that. I think the real figure from that report and many others like it, though, is on average per business leader is saving them, I think it was about $500 to $2,000 a month. And they're also saving about 10 hours a week per person as well. So they're the numbers I would look at, because then I would go back to, a business day is 9 to 5, hypothetically, right? 8 hours. So that is an entire day that each of your team members have got back that they can use. So I'd be looking at what are they using that time on? How are they using that time? What could that be reinvested to? Is it more business development activities? Do you want to give them a Friday off and they go down to a 4-day working week? Is it that they could fill that with, another process that could be improved or enhanced, or a new offering that could put to the market? So I think whilst the 82 sounds fantastical, it is just I've turned on Copilot, I've got AI,
Yeah.
which is not true. We've seen that. We've used it with businesses in the community as well, that basically show them how you can get more out of it and what custom solutions actually look like. But
Yeah.
the real numbers of getting that money out, getting the hours saved, they're undeniable. So they should be used by every SMB and large enterprise organization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So fast forward 10 years to 2037. Uh, the landscape obviously looks a lot different, but currently there's 18% of businesses that aren't using AI. If you are a business not using AI in 2036, are you just absolutely doomed? Or is there a place for businesses without any AI integration in the distant future?
I think again, it comes back to, does it benefit your business for a specific outcome? Like you said, beating the drum again, because we need to make sure that people really understand this, right? Because if your entire business is maybe relationship driven, maybe PR sort of thing, then you could have an incredibly good relationship that can't physically be replaced by AI, never can, never will be, but the processes that sit behind it could be, again, depend on the scales that you're operating at. I think, and we've seen it in the reports as well, if you are a lagger versus a leader for using AI, we have seen that you are losing market share. There's been reports out there, there's been, BCG and many others that have highlighted this, that show that if you are, there was one report that showed that there was a negative 2.7 basically return on those that are laggers, and a 7.2x return if you are one of the leaders. So you're not going to ignore that differential in the future. Now, to talk 10 years in the time, I mean, who knows? We could all have Neuralink chips or something, or we could all be living on Mars by then, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's an incredibly far looking journey. But what I would say for any business owner, leader listening now, set the foundations up right now for the tech and tooling that your team use day to day, the data architecture layer that sits there, and then the training for the team, the change management, bringing them on that journey for that future. Because then, regardless of what the latest AI tool or tech or innovation is, they will know how to use it, know why we're using it, felt invested in the journey that we're going through. Your data will be in a fantastic landscape, and you'll be able to get the outputs in the future there as well. So I think we'll see lots of turmoil between then and now, for each industry being disrupted in different ways, like we saw for call centers. Who knows if a call center will even exist in 10 years because of voice
Yeah.
AI? So I think we will see industries decimate and adjust in some ways, but some people like to talk to a human. So again, when would that be needed? And maybe that is a, VIP offering that you're going to get straight back to a human. You're going to chat to them if you're an Amex black card holder or something, versus if you're just a normal Amex person, you've got a voice AI that you chat to instead. So I think that's probably where I'd see some of that human processes definitely staying, which are not impacted by AI in the same way, regardless.
Yeah, well, I want to piggyback off that sentiment. 50% of consumers prefer non-AI brands. Now that doesn't shock me at all, really, because we've seen this massive pushback of AI. You see any AI content online, you'll no doubt see comments saying AI slop. You see, I think Coca-Cola, they released a
Yeah.
commercial, AI commercial, so much pushback on that. The music artist Action Bronson, typically he's known for releasing albums where he actually paints his album cover. He released an album cover where it had AI, and his fans went crazy about it, right? And he said this was just a placeholder. This was just a placeholder. But it gets people really, really mad. So I guess, what's your initial thoughts on hearing that statistic? Does that track to you?
Yes, but I think again it comes back to why is it? Because again, there is AI slop that exists and it is recognizable and you can tell it's AI, but that's the version now. If you look 2 years ago, we had Will Smith eating spaghetti like he was, flinging his arms around, right? So it's coming a long way. I think is AI being needed in where it's actually needed, and what do we need a human to do with its contextual knowledge versus a robotic process automation that can be dealt with by AI in the background? Because I'm sure if you asked people, do you want to fill in this form, 50 different times, or you can get AI to do it so you can sit on a beach on the weekend and not worry about anything, they would choose that option. What I look at though is, for example, that one that you just gave around the musician, this is where I think it comes down to people's personal preference, like we saw with the Apple innovation as well, the Apple advert as well. People want some of the creative stuff to stay humanly creative. So maybe that is you write a fantastic picture or art, whatever you want, and that is you kind of expressing yourself in that way. But that's not to say, for example, some of the AI music generation stuff like that is fantastic now, and it can give you some
Yeah.
really good songs. So I think it's that there's the kind of the division in the middle, right? Of what can we do from a business AI process? I'm sure there is much, and we've seen it in the reports, there is much more willingness to have AI in that part of the process to get the day-to-day done. But
Yep.
people still want the protection over the more the creative, you know, I don't think people would read, and maybe we can test this. Maybe this is a challenge we should do. We should release a book of, that under J.K. Rowling sort of, it's A.C. Smith or something. It's a
Yeah.
book entirely written by AI, and see if people actually notice the difference and don't want to use it. And that's where I think as AI gets better over time, it'll get harder to tell, but people will still want the reassurance what's human versus AI.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point. Do you think we'll have, made by humans as kind of a marketing badge going forward, so people can know for sure that their product or service is run by real humans?
Yeah, I'm already seeing it on YouTube. Some people are putting in their thumbnails for, animation videos explaining, history. They say not AI, it's actually done by humans and CGI. But I'm
Yeah.
sure as every iteration, I mean, if we go back many, many years, I'm sure picture, writers for the old school Disney animations were probably horrified when this thing called CGI came along. Didn't want to use it, never going to use it, never going to touch it. It's the worst thing on planet Earth. And it just evolved the industry to go from writing all of these things down, which, don't get me wrong, they look amazing for some of the old school stuff and they're really sentimental, but it's just that general iteration that comes through for whatever it may be in the next round. But again, creative is one side, business application is another, and you could argue the personal is kind of that intersection between the two.
Cool. Okay, so Musk versus Sam Altman, Elon Musk versus Sam Altman, they've been in a back and forth court case. Altman testified Musk wanted 90% of the company. Brockman said Musk was secretly working on Tesla AI. Musk's lawyers apologized for his absence. He was in China. This whole calamity has been pretty fun to watch from the outside. What are your thoughts on their really Goliath versus Goliath battle that's happening right now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so first of all, if we kind of acknowledge we're both not lawyers, we don't know the ins and outs of the legalities and all these different things, but the arguments put forward were really, really interesting for both sides. When it came down to it, of course, the ruling was on OpenAI side versus maybe let's say Sam Altman's side. It was interesting to note that, of course, the judge actually said that she would have dismissed the case initially because she didn't think there was grounds for it anyway, but it went through regardless. The other side of it as well is when you actually look at some of the details of the court case that kind of went through, they were saying that the reason they went with OpenAI side is because there was actually, a couple of years where if Elon wanted to, he could have actually gone through and filed that, lawsuit
Mm.
because he was having a problem with it. But he waited until they basically started making money from it and waited, I think it was about 2 years before even filing the lawsuit. So the timeline they said went in OpenAI's favor. I do have concerns about this entire thing of OpenAI, or let's say charity organizations being for profit. I think that flip really does need to be analyzed across the world, not just for the UK. Oh, sorry, for the US. I think what we need to look at though is, of course, it is a business now. It is being operated a business. They have the investors. They are going through its closed source models and everything like that. So I think the argument more is, again, what does that future look like? Elon, again, didn't win this court case for open versus closed beforehand to get that controlling interest, but I think it's still interesting to analyze that entire space. But I don't know, what did you think? It's quite contentious. It's been going for a long time, right? Is it right? Is it wrong? Should Musk win? Should Musk lose? And like you said, if he's building his own thing in the background, was he trying to siphon off information in the meantime?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's an extremely slippery slope, specifically around the non-profit to profit pipeline, because I don't agree with that. I just, on an ethical level, I think like if you're doing something for non-profit, it should absolutely stay non-profit because then what are people going to do? They're going to start non-profits, reap all the benefits of being a non-profit financially, and then, oh, wow, the business is going really, really good. We can make a lot of money from this. Let's switch out. Now we have momentum. I'm sure there was a lot of people who invested in that company being a nonprofit for the betterment of humanity. Like that was the
Mm.
stuff that Sam Altman used to talk about all the time. And I feel like this is just the traditional arc of the altruistic rich man where they talk about the greater good and then, they pivot to, hard right-wing economic theory. And I've just seen that time and time again because I used to be a huge Elon fan. I used to be a massive Elon fanboy back in the day. But definitely don't feel the same way about it in 2026, the way, some of these deals have happened. And on Elon, you know, being on the other side of this lawsuit, I don't think his true intentions are pure. I can't sit here and believe that. So that's my thoughts. I think it's not good. Definitely sets a precedent, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out in the future with other nonprofits going into profits because that's how the law works. They set a precedent. They look back on, oh, this versus this person, and then they use that as a reference, and that's how a lot of companies get away with a lot of things.
Definitely, definitely. I don't see too many charity owners driving a Koenigsegg at $4 billion, whatever it was, as a daily driver. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Definitely not. So the last thing we want to touch on today is real-time AI translation. The three new real-time audio models with conversational task execution, 70 plus language translations, and live transcription. That's pretty exciting. It's one of those things that we always looked at in TV shows, Star Trek. You can listen to another person's language or read, the other person's language in real time with meta glasses or whatever. What's your thoughts around this, Alex?
I think it's fantastic that this technology is coming through to the forefront. I mean, I know we're in different countries, but we speak English, right? But being able to converse with lots of different people from around the world in a native tone, so to speak, I think will be fantastic. The fact that it's real time as well is just getting better and better and better. I think what's going to be interesting to see is, yes, OpenAI, I've got this, it's fantastic. They've already got, Whisper and all these different backend elements that enable us to kind of do that speech to text or text to speech. So they need it themselves for that capability. But I think the other side that we're starting to see a lot more as well is, of course, Apple have that deal with OpenAI for that actual voice side that's coming through for basically replacing Siri. So I think it will be interesting to see, of course, that application, that data they get through. The other side that I'd put on this as well, which is in the same realm of real-time translation, real-time speaking, is the other thing that Google mentioned at the I/O Summit of this year, is they're going to be releasing brand new smart glasses with two actual glasses providers, some premium brands in the market, and they're looking to have that next stab at Google Glass that came out, in 2012, I think it was, but something that actually works this time and is actually attractive to wear on your face versus, like you
Yeah.
were saying, something off Star Trek that looks a bit peculiar when you're walking around. It's already working with, some other tools that are out there as well that are glasses with heads-up displays that are things. So I think it's just that natural evolution of AI kind of getting involved. Samsung's getting involved in that Google deal as well. So for the glasses, it'd be interesting to see how this space develops. But I am all for people being able to talk in real time, understand them. I think it opens up lots of opportunities for travel and business deals as well, which would be great to see.
Yeah, I've always been a massive fan of AR, augmented reality, and I guess you could call this a different form of augmented reality. But the idea of having glasses with a heads-up display is fulfilling so many childhood fantasies of mine. So I'm very pleased to see this come to life. But I think we will call it there. Alex, I would love for you to tell our viewers about an extremely exciting community that we've got running. Please tell them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so we run a community which is called AI for Business. Again, all the links will be in the descriptions down below, or come across to school.com and search for it in there. Quick Google search as well. This entire business community is for business owners, business leaders. We vet everyone that comes through to make sure you are that decision maker, to be able to get in the room with those other decision makers as well. We are a global community working with people from all different industries, from trade businesses to service businesses. And we've got one simple goal, which is how can we help you get the most out of AI in your business? We help you with the governance, the strategy, the tech and tooling, getting stuff switched on, your team up training. So if you want to get ahead with AI in your business, that's what Cameron and I can help you with.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Alex. Very concise and impactful marketing right there. But thank you, everyone who took the time to watch this. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the energy. We know that the AI space, the tech space, it can be overwhelming. It can be scary, but that's what we're here to do, break it down in layman's terms and have conversations about how it can be practically implemented into your business. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.